yourself actually ever look through the window to the sliding glass door outside?
No.
In terms of when you heard the gunshot, did you take any action after hearing the gunshot?
I went outside.
Okay. If you could tell the jury how you would have gone outside, through the back, the sliding door, or did you take another route?
I went through the garage.
Okay. And in going through the garage, did you grab anything on your way out?
A flashlight.
Okay. After you went out through the garage, where did you go and what route did you take to get to where you saw something?
I went to the left, toward the sidewalk, and then I just walked towards the back to the T.
Okay. And when you got back there, did you see a man standing on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. And did you know that man prior to that night?
No.
Okay. And do you know that person now to be George Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see that person in the courtroom today, sir?
Yes.
And is that the person that just stood up for purpose of the record?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness that identified the defendant, George Zimmerman?
The record will so reflect.
When you first saw him, was the defendant standing up or sitting down or laying down?
He was walking towards my direction.
Okay. And did he walk directly towards you, or did he stop, or what happened?
He walked directly towards me.
Okay. Now, did you have your flashlight? Did you have it illuminating or on?
Yes.
Okay. And was it dark outside?
Yes.
When you observed the defendant, did you say he walked towards you?
Yes.
Did he have anything in his hands when you observed him?
As I came around the corner, I noticed that he had his cell phone to his left ear.
Okay. And was he holding it just to his ear?
Yes, it looked like that.
Okay. And when you say up to his left ear, can you demonstrate?
Like this.
Okay. Did you notice any blood on him, sir?
Yes.
And where did you notice the blood?
Down his nostrils, streaming down both sides of his lips, I believe. Of his lips.
Could you tell whether there was any damage to his nose, sir?
No.
And did you subsequently also see some blood on the back of his head?
Yes.
Sir, did you end up taking some photographs using your cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, did you take a photograph of the back of his head?
Yes.
Did you take a photograph of the person you now know has been identified as Trayvon Martin on the ground?
Yes.
And did you also take a photograph of a flashlight that was on the ground?
Next to the body, yes.
Okay. And I apologize, there was two flashlights. There was one big flashlight next to the body that you photographed?
Yes.
Okay. Did you use your cell phone to take those photographs?
Yes.
And did you take, using your cell phone, did you use the flash from the cell phone, or did you use the flashlight you had with you?
I used the flashlight.
I'm going to ask you to, if you could, look at over here to the wall to your, thank you, Your Honor. Let me just setting up where you lived at that time back in February of 2012. I'm showing you for the purpose of the record, State's Exhibit 1 that's been introduced into evidence. This is a Google or aerial photograph of the retreat of Twin Lakes. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to hopefully get this to work and show you the area that I'm going to focus on. Would your residence be right here where I'm pointing to, sir?
Yes.
Okay. The route you took, did you say you went out the garage? Did you take this walkway that I'm
Yes.
pointing the aerial and go back to the back here?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when you came into contact with the defendant when he was walking towards you, where approximately you would have had contact with him? And I'm going to move the arrow around and you tell me where to stop.
A little higher.
Higher?
At the T.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit number 3. Can you see your residence from that photograph, sir?
No.
Okay. State's Exhibit 3, in terms of how dark it was, is this area that I'm pointing to here establish how dark it was out there?
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit number 5, does that photograph in any way depict part of your residence, sir?
Yes.
And what part of your residence does that show?
The back patio.
Okay. And am I pointing the area to it?
Yes.
This light that's on, was that on when the shooting and this happened, or was that turned on after?
That was off, and it was turned on after.
And is this the area approximately where you came into contact with the defendant, George Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay, near where the T is or the dog trash receptacle?
Yes.
State exhibit number 6, would this have been your back porch or the pavement that's been described as like the back porch of your residence?
Yes.
Okay. State's exhibit number 10, what does that photograph show, sir?
Shows the back of my house, the T.
All right. And is this the area you came walking out of when you came into contact with the defendant?
Yes.
State's exhibit number 11, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay, what does that photograph show, sir?
The back of the house and where the crime scene finally ended.
Okay. When you came out there, were all these markers out there when you first came out?
No.
Okay. Were you the first person after the shot that came into contact with anybody out there, the defendant and the victim on the ground?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, were there police officers out there when you came out there?
No.
Did police officers arrive subsequent to you being out there?
Yes.
Okay. State's exhibit number 34. Do you recognize what that is?
Looks like the front of the house.
Okay, and that would have been your residence back in February of 2012?
Yes.
Okay. And State's exhibit 35, is that showing just a close-up of that area?
Yes.
State's exhibit 37, that's a daytime photograph. Does that show the area that you've been talking about?
Yes.
Okay. State's exhibit 40, tell us what that photograph shows, sir.
The sidewalk towards the T.
Okay.
That's where I had taken the path to the back.
When you left out from the garage, you would have taken this route this way?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. State's exhibit 76, did you take this photograph, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it was raining that night, was it not, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall the position that you would have taken this photograph? Obviously, it shows the back of the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman's head. Was he sitting down, standing up, or how was he?
He was squatting.
Okay. And was that after the officers came?
This was before.
Okay. State exhibit 77, what does that photograph show?
I believe that's Trayvon Martin.
Is this the way you found the victim, in this case, Mr. Martin's body?
Yes.
Did you move the body at all?
No.
When you observed Mr. Martin's body, his hands were underneath his body, is that correct, his torso?
Yes.
Did you tamper or mess with that at all? In other words, did you move his hands or turn him upside down, or did you do anything like that?
I never left the sidewalk, so no.
This photograph that you would have taken of Mr. Trayvon Martin's body, the light that's shining on there, is that from your flashlight again?
Yes.
State exhibit 78, you took this photograph too, sir, using your cell phone?
Yes.
And what were you trying to show in that photograph, sir?
That there was an object next to him that wasn't. I didn't see any other objects on the ground other than a little flashlight on the beginning part of the T. So that one just stood out.
Okay, and am I pointing to it right here in this photo, this part of the photograph, State's exhibit 78?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
And again, the light that's showing on there, is that from your flashlight?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm through with. Thank you very much. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Manalo, back in February of 2012, specifically February 26th of 2012, showing you State's Exhibit 139, with your residence have been 2861, where I already have your wife's name on there.
Yes.
And is this area depicted in terms of you going out the garage and coming around here?
Yes.
Is that what you described earlier?
Yes.
Thank you. What I want to do now is have you elaborate a little bit about what we talked about, specifically your contact with the defendant. And the flashlight that you saw on the ground that you photographed, was that flashlight on in terms of, was it illuminating?
No.
When you observed the victim in this case, Mr. Martin on the ground, Trayvon Martin on the ground, was he moving at all, or did he say anything when you came upon him?
No.
Now, I apologize if I already asked you, did you say his hands and arms that were under his torso, his hands were?
Yes.
If you could, tell the jury when you first came into contact with the defendant, when you observed him, if you said anything to him and if he said anything to you, please tell us what happened.
Okay, I came around the corner and he was walking to me and I asked him, do I need to call 911? He says, no, I just got off the phone with him. And then he asked me.
At that point, did you see a gun, sir?
No, I did not see a gun.
Did you, other than when the police got there, did you see a gun on the defendant?
No.
Did it appear to you as if the defendant had been in a fight, sir?
Yes.
Did he speak to you, sir?
Yes.
Did he respond to your questions?
Yes.
Did he appear as if he was out of it, like not thinking clearly?
No.
Did you have any trouble understanding him when he spoke?
No.
Did you ask him something when you found out that he had a gun? Did you ask him anything about the gun, sir?
I asked him what caliber he used.
And what did he say, sir?
9mm.
Did a police officer arrive, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell the jury what happened when the officer arrived?
He says, for my safety, I'm going to handcuff you. He says, okay. He had his cell phone in his hand, so he kind of like tossed it on the ground. And he says, can you call my wife?
Okay, let me interrupt you a second. When you say he had the cell phone in his hand, are you speaking of the defendant, George Zimmerman?
Yes.
And you said when the officer came, he tossed it on the ground?
Yes.
He being Mr. Zimmerman tossed it on the ground?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize, I interrupted you. Did the officer ask him who shot the Trayvon Martin? I know he didn't use the word Trayvon Martin, but who shot the person?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did, at that time when the officer, I apologize, I interrupted you, when the officer asked him about a gun, what happened then?
He put him in his handcuffs, and he asked me to call his wife.
Okay. Did the officer ask the defendant whether he had a gun on him?
Yes.
And defendant indicate or point or do something related to where the gun was?
Yes.
Tell us, if you could, the circumstances related to that.
He put his right arm up, and he says, I have it here.
And had you seen the gun prior to him saying that?
No.
When the defendant put his right arm up and he indicated that he had a gun, at that time were you able to observe it?
Yes.
And where was the gun, sir?
What was the gun?
Where was it?
Where it was? It was inside the waistband holster.
Okay. Prior to that, had you seen the gun at all?
No.
Okay. And did you observe the officer then handcuff the defendant and do something with the gun?
Yes, he put it in, I guess, his utility belt so he would have control of it.
Did the officer tell the defendant he was going to put him in handcuffs?
Yes.
And the defendant replied and say that that was fine?
Yes.
You mentioned something about the defendant throwing the phone on the ground. Tell us what happened regarding that, sir.
He asked me to call his wife. I said, let him put you in his handcuffs. Once he had done that, I picked up his phone, I put it in his pocket, and I zipped it up, and then I called his wife through my phone.
Okay. He asked you to call his wife, meaning the defendant asked you to call his wife?
Yes.
And you stated you picked up the cell phone?
Yes.
And you put it in whose pocket?
Zimmerman's pocket.
Okay. Do you know what pocket you put it in?
His left side pocket.
And why did you pick the left side pocket to put the gun in?
Why did I pick that pocket? Because it was closest to me.
Okay. The defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, asked you to call his wife. Did you do that?
Yes.
Did you know her number?
No.
Did you know her before him telling you to call her?
No.
How were you able to get his number?
He gave me her number.
So did you actually dial her number?
Yes.
And did you call her?
Yes.
Did you talk to her?
Yes.
Tell us the circumstance of what happened what did you tell her and what did she say? And also more importantly, if the defendant said anything while this was going on.
Okay. I had a connection with her right away, and I said, your husband has been involved in a shooting. He's being handcuffed, and he's going to be held for questioning at the Sanford Police Department. And around that time, he kind of cut me off, and he says, just tell her I shot someone.
Okay. When you say he cut you off, the defendant cut you off?
Yes.
And he said what now?
Just tell her I shot someone.
Did you respond to that?
Yes.
What did you say?
Okay, well, he just shot someone.
Were you saying to his wife on the phone?
Yes, I was saying it to his wife.
In terms of when he said that, how would you describe the defendant's demeanor?
Like I was taking too long to say what I had to say.
You mentioned you saw the victim's body, the person you now know as Trayvon Martin. Did you see any movement at any time out there in his body?
No.
Did you ever hear him say anything?
No.
Now, in terms of when you heard the shot and when you ended up going outside, if you could estimate, I know you didn't have a stopwatch, how long did it take you to, upon hearing the shot, go out the garage and go outside and come into contact with the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
It could have been 10, 20 seconds.
When you first observed him, was your first observation that he had been in a fight and been beaten?
Yes.
Okay. Did you remain outside while the officers arrived?
Yes.
Were you present when they attempted to revive or save the life of Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
Could you tell us what you recall seeing or observing about that?
The first officer arrived and turned him over, and I think more were starting to come. He was asking for a bag to do compressions on his chest, and then I watched them perform CPR.
Okay. Regarding the bag, did you go somewhere and get a bag to assist the officers?
I went through the garage, and my wife handed me a bag.
A Walmart bag?
Yes.
Okay. And did you come back out and provide that to the officer in an attempt to save Trayvon Martin's life?
Yes.
Now, prior to that night, had you ever met George Zimmerman?
No.
Had you ever met Trayvon Martin?
No.
Were you ever involved in the Neighborhood Watch program at all?
No.
Why not?
I have work. I got other things that I have to do. I have a 6-year-old to take care of, so.
When you first came into contact with the defendant that evening, did he appear to be in shock, sir?
No.
And what is your opinion based on, sir?
He wasn't acting like anything different. I mean, he was coherent. He was responding to my questions like it was not like just like any other person.
Okay. In your actions there before the officer came, did you observe the defendant at any time look back at the body of Trayvon Martin?
No.
Did the defendant appear calm, sir?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. O'Mara?
Mr. West, Your Honor.
Mr. West?
Afternoon.
12.
Thank you. I'll grab my water. I'll be right back. You're in the living room with your wife and your daughter putting some furniture together when you hear some noises outside, correct?
Yes.
And your wife expressed sort of an interest in seeing what was going on, and you basically told her just mind your own business.
Yes.
And she said there's two guys out there fighting, or some guys fighting, correct?
Yes.
And you weren't unable to see anything.
No.
You never looked out. But you did hear the noise continue after that,
Yes.
and it moved from where you were at the corner of the complex, it moved from your right to left,
Yes.
as if from the area of the T on past your unit.
Yes.
And as you were hearing this, there was a point where you heard what you believed to be a shot.
Yes.
Did you hear the shot yourself, or did your wife say, I think I hear a shot?
We both heard the shot.
So in your mind, it was unmistakable that it was a shot.
Yes.
You made the decision then to go find out what that was about.
Yes.
And in order to do that, you went from the living room near the back of the residence the other direction, towards the garage.
Yes.
And in the garage, you grabbed a flashlight.
Yes.
Did you go out the garage door?
Yes.
And then basically on the front of your house, which is at Retreat View Circle.
Yes.
So you then would have had to turn back around and run the length of your house, your unit, that would basically bring you within view of where this event had occurred.
Yes, but I didn't run.
Walked briskly, just a sense of that is all.
I was carefully walking. I didn't just walk upon the scene, seeing what was going on.
Well, sure, you'd heard a gunshot, right?
Right.
You'd take some precautions, I would think.
Yes.
So you had a flashlight, and obviously you had your cell phone. And your best estimate is that it was somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds from when you heard the shot as to when you got to where you could actually see something.
Yes.
At first, you didn't see Trayvon Martin's body, correct?
Correct.
What you saw instead, or what caught your attention first, actually, what may have caught your attention first was the little flashlight that was on.
No.
What caught your attention first was George Zimmerman.
Yes.
And when you saw him there, he was breathing hard.
Yes.
He was staggering.
Yes.
And it looked to you like he'd just gotten his butt beat.
Yes.
And you approached him.
Yes.
You weren't fearful of him.
No.
Didn't turn the other way to call the police.
I had asked him, do I need to call the police?
Well, I'm saying yourself. As you approached, you saw him, you knew there was a gunshot. You didn't turn to call the police yourself.
Right.
And when you got closer to Mr. Zimmerman, you asked him, in fact, do I need to call the police?
Yes.
And and he told you, no, I already called them, something to that effect.
Yes.
And you didn't know yourself at that moment whether he was talking about the call that he tried to be making or was on the phone, or whether he had called them himself 2, 3, 4 minutes before.
Not aware of that.
Right. Your assumption was that when you saw him on the phone at that point, with the phone up to his ear, that he had been talking to the police.
Yes.
But of course, all of that would have had to have taken place within the 10 to 20 seconds that it took you to get there before you saw him, after the shot.
Correct.
So he would have had to have placed a call to the police. He would have had to have called the police, waited for the call to connect, and then had the conversation with the police, have that over by the time you asked him, do you want me to call the police?
I'm not aware of that. I mean, he wasn't talking on the phone. It just, as I came around the corner, he had just had the phone to his ear.
Right. And you learned very soon thereafter that he wanted you to tell his wife about being involved in a shooting.
Yes.
He was trying to catch his breath, and he asked you, in fact, am I bleeding?
Yes.
And you noticed that indeed he was. He was bleeding from his face.
Yes.
It looked like his nose was dripping.
Yes.
And then he kind of stooped over like this, as if trying to collect himself.
No, he just squatted down. He didn't stoop down like that. He just
Like this?
Yeah.
As if trying to collect himself.
I want to say collect himself, but I guess so. I don't know. But he did squat down.
Now, did you say that in a prior statement, that you thought he kind of stooped down to try to collect himself?
I believe I said he squatted down.
I don't mean, I'm not squat versus stoop, but that he bent down in some way
Yes.
to try to collect himself. He was breathing hard. He looked like he'd just gotten his butt beat.
Yes.
Compound question.
Can answer if he understands.
He did.
Yeah.
Sure. So at that point, you could actually see that he was also bleeding from the back of his head.
Yes.
You hadn't noticed that before.
No.
And you had your flashlight and you had your cell phone with you,
Yes.
and you took that opportunity to take the picture of the back of his head. I'm sorry, it's this picture?
Yes.
So as Mr. Zimmerman kind of squatted down to collect himself, you took it upon yourself to take the picture.
Yes.
He didn't ask you to take the picture.
No.
Thankfully you did, but that was your decision.
Yes.
You also asked him what happened.
Yes.
And he said, this guy was beating me up and I shot him.
And I had to defend myself, and I shot him.
I'm sorry.
I was defending myself, and I shot him.
So this guy was beating me up, I was defending myself, and I shot him, is what he told you.
Yes.
Without hesitation.
No.
And from what you could tell at the moment, it seemed completely true.
Yes.
It wasn't very long until the police arrived. You were standing there talking to Mr. Zimmerman as he tried to collect himself, and shortly thereafter, Officer Tim Smith of the Sanford Police Department got there, correct?
I didn't know his name.
Well,
Yep, right.
A police within a very short time, the first police officer arrived,
Right.
and he had a flashlight.
I don't remember if he had a flashlight.
You don't remember the next person after you arriving with a flashlight?
I knew it was a police officer, but I don't remember the flashlight because I already had mine on.
Oh, right, you could see from your own flashlight,
Yes.
but it was really, really dark out there.
Yes.
So Officer Smith will use that for our purposes, or the first officer arrived, and he said, "Who shot him?"
Yes.
And George Zimmerman immediately said, "I did."
Yes.
And Officer Smith said, "Do you have a gun?" or something to that effect.
Yes.
And George Zimmerman immediately complied by raising his arms, or his right arm, and exposed the firearm that was in the holster on his right side.
Yes.
And then Officer Smith's response or reaction was, "I'm going to handcuff you for officer safety."
Yes.
And that's in fact what happened.
Yes.
And George Zimmerman complied fully with that request.
Yes.
He basically made himself available to be cuffed behind the back.
Yes.
In the meantime, while George Zimmerman was in the process of being cuffed, he wanted you to call his wife.
Yes.
And in the process of him being cuffed and wanting you to call his wife, he put the phone on the ground.
Yes.
He couldn't very well do much since he was in the process of being cuffed other than that, correct?
Right.
So your purpose at that point was to let his wife know that her husband had been involved in a shooting.
Yes.
And indeed, That's what you did.
Yes.
You called and had a conversation with the person on the other end that you believed to be his wife.
Yes.
And your statement to her was, your husband's been involved in a shooting,
Yes.
and he's going to be taken in for questioning.
Yes.
And you were beginning to explain a little bit when Mr. Zimmerman, in the process of being handcuffed, said, just tell her I shot someone. Correct?
Yes.
And that's to make it absolutely clear that he wasn't the one who had been shot,
Objection.
and that he was...
What Mr. Zimmerman was thinking?
Sustained.
You suggested a moment in your direct that he may have been abrupt. And abrupt by saying, basically, just get to the point.
Yes.
The point being that he wasn't shot, someone else had been shot.
Yes.
You thought that the way that Mr. Zimmerman said that wasn't animated enough. He wasn't hyper enough. He wasn't agitated enough for you to think that he was in shock.
I don't understand.
When you were asked, do you think he was in shock, in your mind, being in shock means somebody that's hyper, somebody that's agitated.
Or just complete unresponsive.
One extreme or the other.
Right.
So either someone's going to be basically bouncing off the walls or numb.
Right.
And Mr. Zimmerman wasn't either of those.
Right.
He was pointed, correct, in his response, just tell her I shot someone.
Yes.
He was also compliant with the police officer so that he did understand what was being said.
Yes.
And what struck you was that he was not, rather than not being animated, he was kind of flat. That's what you mean, didn't appear to be in shock, he was just kind of flat.
Yes.
So that's what you took to mean that he wasn't in shock.
Right.
Not that you have any particular training or experience in identifying when people are in shock.
Right.
I take it this isn't something that you've been involved in very many times in your life, if ever before.
Right.
While you were just something that reminded me here, you don't attend any of the HOA meetings yourself?
No.
You don't involve yourself in the community itself?
No.
With your work and family and all the stuff you've got going on, you don't attend meetings or participate in programs like Neighborhood Watch?
No.
Your view, at least at that point in your life in that community, was you just sort of mind your own business, go to work, and do what you need to do to support your family.
Right, and if there was ever a problem, because there's a sign up there that says Neighborhood Watch, if there was ever a problem, just call 911.
Mm-hmm. So when you come into the community, then there's a sign that says Neighborhood Watch, correct?
Yes.
And I suppose that means that somebody coming into the community to steal stuff or to hurt people would see that, presumably, and think that there's somebody there that may be watching them.
I wouldn't think that's what it meant. I would think it would have meant that people in the neighborhood would work together if there was a problem and call 911 if there was a problem, but not necessarily for a warning for would-be criminals to come in there to...
You don't think that was kind of like having a security alarm company sign in the front yard but not actually having a system?
Haven't really thought about that, no.
Your perspective was it just reminds people that if they see a problem, they should call 911.
Right.
You familiar that the Community Neighborhood Watch program involved more communication more contact among neighbors, guidance as to what they should do, not if it's just an emergency that would require a 911 call, but what to do in a suspicious circumstance by calling a non-emergency number.
I don't understand.
Just you didn't know what was going on in the community, specifically with Neighborhood Watch.
Right.
I know you said that it was dark, and I know that you had a flashlight, and I know that you took 2 pictures that show Trayvon Martin lying on the ground following the shot. Those are in evidence as 77 and 78. Could we, first of all, we're going to show those here in a second, but the exact position that's shown in the photograph is the exact position that you personally saw with your eyes Trayvon Martin's body.
Yes.
You saw his legs kind of spread like this, almost as if you were riding a bicycle.
I don't remember.
Let's take a look at 77. Would you pull that up, please?
I got this one and I got 78 too.
Well, that's 77, so that's, I'm sorry, that's,
You want 77 or 78?
I don't care. We'll start with this one. Mr. Manalo, you took this photo of Trayvon Martin, and you see the legs that I've described as sort of almost riding a bicycle type position with the right knee bent and the
Yes.
hip at an angle. Do you see that?
Yes.
That's exactly how you first observed Mr. Martin's body when you got there.
Yes.
And the illumination of Mr. Martin's body is from your flashlight, correct?
Yes.
It's not from the flash on the phone.
No.
So you shined the flashlight and then took the photo.
Yes.
Around that spot, where you see it's much darker, is that a good depiction of what the overall lighting conditions were that night?
Yes.
If I could then see 78. Okay. So this is the next picture that you took. I don't know which sequence, and that doesn't matter, but the other picture that you took states 78. And you can see, can you not, that Trayvon Martin's body is in the same position, although it's a lot harder to see, isn't it?
Yes.
And now you can see more clearly this flashlight.
Yes.
And the flashlight was not on at any point in time when you saw it.
No.
At that point, you had no idea whether it may even have been connected to the case, only that you saw it there and it caught your attention.
Yes.
So when you shifted your flashlight to point at the one in the picture, then as you can see here, Mr. Martin's body was, just like I said before, except for what you're showing with your flashlight, everything else was really quite dark.
Right.
Do you know where you were standing at that point?
I was standing on the sidewalk.
Where you had encountered Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Basically in the same spot, right?
Yes.
So from your vantage point where you had taken this picture generally, you sort of turned and took the pictures that we've shown here?
Yes.
You were up near the T intersection.
Yes.
your best recollection is that you were at the T intersection when you took this picture?
I was a few feet away from the T, but I was in that area.
You were somewhere between the actual T intersection and far enough down the sidewalk where you could see Mr. Martin's body to have taken this picture?
Yes.
You recognize that the light on the sort of back patio area is from the light of the second unit in from the corner?
I couldn't remember that, whether that's the second or the third unit from the corner.
It was not, however, directly across from you.
Correct.
It was somewhat to the left of where your unit was.
Yes.
Sorry. Not quite yet, Judge. Thank you. Just for orientation in the photo and sort of where you were when it was taken, you see the porch light or the lit area in the back,
Yes.
and you believe that to be the back of someone's unit, either the second or possibly the third unit.
Yes.
And then in the lower left corner, there seems to be sort of a dark edge. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that the sidewalk?
Yes.
So what you're seeing here is the edge of the sidewalk on the left, the illuminated flashlight that's off, and then Mr. Martin's body.
Yes.
In between the sidewalk and the back patio area of that residence.
Yes.
When you say that you saw Mr. Martin's hands or arms tucked under him, do I understand correctly that you saw what's in the picture? Nothing
Yes.
different than that?
No.
So whatever is in the picture is what you saw?
Yes.
There was a woman that testified earlier this week, Jeannie Manalo. Is that your wife that
Yes.
you talked about? You have a minute? Yes, I'll clarify something. Sorry. When you took this picture, you were basically at the spot where you had encountered Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
You mentioned that you felt,
Remove the image, please.
I'm sorry, what?
Remove the image, please, for Exhibit 78. I'm finished with it.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, I may need it.
Okay.
Okay, but- Mr. Manalo, you mentioned that when you came into contact with the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, that he appeared calm to you, is that correct?
Yes.
And
I'll be glad to rephrase it.
it's already been asked and answered by Mr. Delarion in direct.
Okay, well, this is redirect, and I think he's just trying to orientate the witness as to his next question, so overruled.
You recall when you first came into contact, he was calm, is that correct?
Yes.
And
I think that's a mischaracterization of this witness's testimony
Overruled.
as to whether he was calm.
Okay, the witness can clarify what his answer is.
Thank you, Judge.
how would you describe Mr. Zimmerman's demeanor, sir?
Coherent, compliant. He wasn't, he was calm. You know, he was just basically just walking towards me.
Did he have any trouble walking towards you, sir?
He was staggering a little bit,
Okay. And when you say staggering, elaborate on that, what you mean by that.
basically getting up off the ground.
Was he walking like this?
No, just like hunched.
Meeting, among other things.
Overruled.
Was he erect, sir?
At one point, he became erect, yes.
Okay. Did you have any trouble understanding him when he spoke, Mr. Zimmerman?
No.
In your conversations with Mr. Zimmerman, did you ask him what kind of caliber of gun he had?
Yes.
And did he respond to you?
Yes.
What did the defendant say, sir?
9mm.
You were asked by Mr. West about the statements the defendant made about shooting the individual, and he asked you whether you agreed that that was defending himself. Were you out there when this happened?
I came out after it happened.
Did you see actually what happened? What precipitated this? Or did you actually see the shooting where George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin in the chest? Did you see that?
No.
Do you have any inkling of how it happened, whether it's self-defense or not?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. I apologize. You want this still up? No. Okay. I'm going to show them. That's all right. What do I do?
May Mr. Manalo be excused? Thank you very much, sir. You are excused. Please call your next witness.
Officer Ricardo Ayala.
Yes.
And did you also take a photograph of a flashlight that was on the ground?
Next to the body, yes.
Okay. And I apologize. There was two flashlights. There was one big flashlight next to the body that you photographed?
Yes.
Okay. Did you use your cell phone to take those photographs?
Yes.
And did you take, using your cell phone, did you use the flash from the cell phone, or did you use the flashlight you had with you?
I used the flashlight.
I'm going to ask you to, if you could, look at over here to the wall to your, thank you, Your Honor. Let me just setting up where you lived at that time back in February of 2012, showing you for the purpose of the record, State's Exhibit 1 that's been introduced into evidence. This is a Google or aerial photograph of the retreat of Twin Lakes. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to hopefully get the person out to be George Zimmerman.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see that person in the courtroom today, sir?
Yes.
And is that the person that just stood up for purpose of the record?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness that identified the defendant, George Zimmerman?
The record will so reflect.
When you first saw him, was the defendant standing up or sitting down or laying down?
He was walking towards my direction.
And did he walk directly towards you, or did he stop, or what happened?
He walked directly towards me.
Okay. Now, did you have your flashlight? Did you have it illuminating or on?
Yes.
Okay. And was it dark outside?
Yes.
When you observed the defendant, did you say he walked towards you?
Yes.
Did he have anything in his hands when you observed him?
As I came around the corner, I noticed that he had his cell phone to his left ear.
Okay. And was he holding, just get this to work and show you the area that I'm going to focus on. Would your residence be right here where I'm pointing to, sir?
Yes,
Okay. The route you took, did you say you went out the garage, did you take this walkway that I'm
yes,
pointing the aerial and go back to the back here?
yes.
Do you recall approximately when you came into contact with the defendant, when he was walking towards you, where approximately you would have had contact with him? And I'm going to move the arrow around and you tell me where to stop.
A little higher.
Higher?
At the T,
Right here?
yes.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit number 3. Can you see your residence from that photograph, sir?
No,
Okay. State's Exhibit 3, in terms of how dark it was, is this area that I'm pointing to here establish how dark it was out there?
yes,
Okay. Did you yourself actually ever look through the window to the sliding glass door outside?
no,
In terms of when you heard the gunshot, did you take any action after hearing the gunshot?
I went outside.
Okay. If you could tell the jury how you would have gone outside, through the back, the sliding door, did you take another route?
I went through the garage.
Okay. And in going through the garage, did you grab anything on your way out?
A flashlight.
Okay. After you went out through your garage, where did you go and what route did you take to get to where you saw something?
I went to the left, towards the sidewalk, and then I just walked towards the back to the T.
Okay. And when you got back there, did you see a man standing on the sidewalk?
Yes,
Okay. And did you know that man prior to that night?
no,
Okay. And do you know that to his ear?
yes, it looked like that,
Okay. And when you say up to his left ear, can you demonstrate?
like this.
Okay. Did you notice any blood on him, sir?
Yes,
And where did you notice the blood?
down his nostrils, streaming down both sides of his lips, I believe. Of his lips.
Could you tell whether there was any damage to his nose, sir?
No,
And did you subsequently also see some blood on the back of his head?
yes,
Sir, did you end up taking some photographs using your cell phone?
yes,
Okay. Specifically, did you take a photograph of the back of his head?
yes,
Did you take a photograph of the person you now know has been identified as Trayvon Martin on the ground?